He's waiting.
It's my birthday today.
Uh-oh.
Thank you.
You got nothing better to do.
Oh,
Well, there's things in between I'm doing, so. I'm 35 today.
18 today?
35.
If you found an age of accountability, you can run for president.
I know.
I didn't see a signal saying we could have it ready.
Okay. On air.
Okay, it looks like we are ready to go. It is 8:30. I'll call this meeting to order. Paul's not here. Are you certifying that the open meeting laws were? Okay, thank you. We have a 19-item agenda. Looking,
For approval with the amendment of moving item 14, 15, 16 up to like 10 and a half or whatever. So we're really on the agenda, move the closed sessions. That we don't have.
okay, have we checked that that works with Corporation Counsel? Last time we did it, we lost him for our later meeting.
I think we're all right.
We're all right? Okay, I'll take your word for it. And we have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is moving 14 through 16
Up to like
into right behind 10.
Yeah.
Okay. Adoption of the minutes from the previous meetings.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Mr. Orsh, beat you. Any questions, comments? Okay, if none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carried. We now have a public comment period. Members of the public will have a 15-minute block of time to comment on today's agenda items. Members of the public must be present at the beginning of the meeting. To comment, a period will be waived. Public comment period may be extended or curtailed at the discretion of the chair after advisement by the Exec Finance Committee. Anybody wishing to call in, the number is 715-538-1770. Do we have anybody from the public here wishing to comment on our agenda? I'll call again. Anybody wishing to call in on it, the number is 715-538-1770. We'll leave it open, but move on for the time being. County sales tax update. What's that? It's down a little bit from a year ago, but we're still holding our own, I guess. We've now, with a month to go, exceeded our budget. Any other comments on it? Okay. General fund update. Anybody have anything? I didn't see anything as I took a quick look here on things.
I think anything has changed.
Oh, yep. Okay, well, let's list that as operational. Okay, department reports and requests. One, not county, quarterly date update from Lori Halama, treasurer.
Good morning.
Morning.
You would have received my quarterly report with your agenda, and then also I gave you a year-to-date for 2022, or the total year actually for 2022 report. And interest rates continue to climb for our investments, so that's good news for that part. We exceeded our budget by 253,000. And I don't know what I budgeted for this year, but I'm guessing we will probably exceed whatever I budgeted for this year too, being that the interest rates are continuing to climb. Any questions on my report?
Yeah, I don't have it right in front of me either, but you did raise the investment interest some in the
Yep,
budget.
Yep,
But
but
I
interest
think I
rates
agree
are
with you
still
that it's
climbing,
going to
so,
be
yeah,
better. Good.
yeah.
So what length of time on investments are you making?
Usually the CDs I'll do a year or 2 years. That's the max usually I go. But otherwise, we have a lot of money that's liquid that, in the LGIP and, which is the state investment pool. And then we also have another investment pool that we invest in.
I'm just wondering if the 6 months would be beneficial because of the rates going up, we can hold on and then they go for a longer one after.
Sure. Yeah, as far as CDs, our local banks are not offering a competitive rate with what I'm getting at the LGIP. So I've been keeping most of it in there right now.
LGIP, you can go out of that at any
Mm-hmm,
time.
yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Paul, you have a question, you look on your face. Okay, okay. If not, we'll just accept it as presented. Thank you. And move on to the quarterly update from Rose at County Register of Deeds.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
What I'm going to talk about is item 9, just to give you some update, or give you a background on the real estate transfer fees. The Wisconsin Counties Association on page 3 has it in their legislative agenda to increase the percentage for the Wisconsin, or for the real estate transfer fees. I gave you a sheet where the background information is on there. The real estate transfer fees used to be 50-50. And then in 1981, the state raised the percentage to, they receive 80% and we receive 20%. At that time, they also raised the, from $1 per thousand to $3 per thousand. So the county at that time still got a little bit more, but it was more of a tax on the seller, or when the homes are sold. So the seller was paying more of the fee once they transfer the home. The Wisconsin Counties Association are asking for it because in 2021, the budget surplus was $2.5 billion. And now for 2022, it's raised to $7.1 billion. So the counties are just asking for a larger, or the Wisconsin Counties Association is just asking for a larger percentage. On another page, I gave you what the county share was at 20%, the state share at 80%, and if it would have been 50-50. In the last 6 years, we would have received more than $500,000 in revenue. So the resolution is just asking for a larger split from the 20% to a larger percentage. So I'm not sure if you have any questions. There's a lot of paperwork I gave you, but just to try to explain a little bit as to what the Wisconsin Counties Association is asking for.
If we want to just get it back to what it used to be, 50/50.
Yeah, since the state has such a surplus, it would be, and the counties and the municipalities and the schools are all struggling, and the state has all this surplus, and our office, the Register of Deeds office, does all the collecting and deals with all the problems that come with bounced checks and everything else, and the state just sits back and we send them the money. So it would be, that's what the Wisconsin Counties Association is asking for, is more of a split.
When did that go back? How did it change from 50-50 to?
In 1981, August of 1981. Yeah, it's been a while.
And how is it being calculated?
We, how the,
The transfer fee, how's it calculated?
at, prior to 1981, it was $1 per thousand of the sale, and now it's $3 per thousand of the sale. So this isn't asking any more from the public or from the homeowner, it's just asking more of a split. But yeah, back in 1981, the homeowner took a hit on that when they raised it from $1 per thousand to $3 per
The
thousand.
reason why I asked, just from a numbers perspective, real estate has gone up 40% since COVID. So if it's $3 per thousand and it's up 40%, the collection is a lot more money just in terms of raw dollars
Exactly,
than, than it's ever been.
right?
Even though prices have slipped down maybe 10 or 15% since the high of 40%, we're still 35% up over 2 years ago. So I don't know if we can maybe mention that in here somehow, but they're getting a lot of money that we should be able to collect and keep here. I'm agreeing with what you're saying, so.
Thank you, yeah, I agree.
I don't, anybody else have any comments?
Somebody want to read the lesson, resolution, so we can publish here?
Okay, all right.
That's the official one, huh? Did I hear another volunteer to read? I can read it if you want me to, Paul.
I was just gonna say, I don't know if I got it. I think
Okay.
Sam has to copy.
Okay.
You got one there, it's stapled.
No, I don't have.
I got the official one. Here.
Want me to read it?
I can unless you like to. Okay. This is a request
I'll
for,
read it at the meeting.
no, right. A request for the state to revise the current real estate transfer fees revenue sharing formula. Whereas the collection of a real estate transfer fee by counties was mandated by the state of Wisconsin in 1969 and included a requirement that counties remit 50% of all transfer fees collected to the state. And whereas in 1981, the state changed the transfer fee formula to require counties to remit 80% of all transfer fees collected to the state. And whereas the county, through the Registered Deeds Office, assumes the annual operating costs of recording all real estate transfers occurring in each county, including the collection of real estate transfer fees. And whereas Trempealeau County real estate transfer fee collections over the past 6 years totaled $2,316,946.12, of which the county retained $347,169.76. And $1,388,679.06 was remitted to the state. And whereas using a 50-50 split, the county's share of fees collected on local real estate transfers during the same 6-year period would have provided an additional $520,754.65 in support of local government. And whereas in 2021, the state has built up a budget surplus of approximately $2.5 billion, while many counties continue to struggle financially due to the ever-increasing costs of providing county government services in an inflationary economy and providing services for increasing unfunded state-mandated programs, along with the financial restrictions imposed by state-imposed levy limits. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Trempealeau County Board of Supervisors that in an effort to assist all Wisconsin counties, the state of Wisconsin revised the real estate transfer fee share formula to again allow Wisconsin counties to retain 50% of all real estate transfer fees collected, with 50% being remitted to the state. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to Governor Tony Evers, all members of the state legislature representing Trempealeau County, the Wisconsin Counties Association, and all other counties. And it would be introduced by us if we vote on it. One thing I would see on here, that $2.5 billion must have been written about 6 months or a year ago, because we're now up right over, last I heard, it's over $7 billion.
Yeah, I think we should change that to 7.
Change it to 2022 then?
They should know, but I guess you better remind them.
I would say use 2022 and change that to in excess of 7 billion, because that's what, I don't know, I heard somewhere around, what, 7.1 or something like that?
7.1 billion?
Yeah.
Just say in excess of
In
7
excess of
billion.
7 billion would,
And when you look at it, that's a substantial amount of money that they're keeping that really should have stayed here all along.
Right. Okay, being read from the official, would probably need a motion to change those numbers officially.
I'll make a motion, we change that 2.5 to 7 million, and the 2021 and 2022, and approximately $2.5 billion to in excess of $7 billion.
Okay,
You gotta do a motion for the resolution first and then do the motion.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the resolution.
oh, okay,
I'll second.
okay. All in favor?
No, don't vote.
No, don't vote. Okay, okay.
Okay, then I make a motion to change the whereas in 2021 to 2022, and the budget surplus of approximately 2.5 to in excess of $7 billion.
Okay. Okay, and we have a second to that. Do we have any other discussion on it?
Will we,
You're gonna vote on the amendment first.
Yeah. And this will go to full board too, so,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, we're
Yeah.
gonna have that change before it goes to full board.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it'll have the change in full board, right? Right.
If you pass that motion.
Right.
Yep, okay.
Okay.
We got a motion and a second, didn't we?
You
Yeah.
got a motion and a
Yep.
second to
Yep.
amend. To amend.
We have a motion and second to amend, so now we have to vote to amend to the numbers John stated. That's, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we have the full
You're back to the
resolution. And we
original.
have a motion and a second to, no,
I make a motion that
to-
we
No,
approve.
you
No.
already, you already made the motion.
yep, we already have a motion and second
Okay.
for it. Now we're voting on the amended resolution. And any other
More
discussion,
discussion.
questions?
Okay. Makes sense to me.
If not, we'll call for the vote on it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, that gets adjusted. Okay,
I don't know if there is anything, but no, I think we're actually down to 17, right?
17. No. What's he talking about, 17 is FEMA?
Oh, we got, yeah. Yeah, we didn't do 10 yet. Brian on?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't even see him back there.
okay, that's okay there. Okay, now, I guess we're at number 10, county financing of projects.
Cool.
Oh, okay. This, that's one, huh?
Yes,
Bef-
If you want, you could
Did
just
you
go
make the
sit in the
changes?
front there. and-
Hold me wherever you want me, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know if you wanted to stand that long. 'cause it's-
I've been sitting.
Okay.
I don't mind standing for a bit. Okay?
Very good, yep.
You gotta turn it on,
Turn the
though.
mic on, yep, there.
Brett's good in this
Okay.
case. All right, good morning to you all. Last we spoke, we were going to do an exercise and some forward-looking estimates related to financing additional capital projects to inform us as to how to potentially structure the debt issue that has been discussed for 2023 capital projects, which is largely comprised of roads and bridges and a nominal amount for public safety, primarily acquisitions of vehicles for the Sheriff's Department. As we've talked about previously, you've got really a range from anywhere from, say, 1 to 20 years in terms of how you go about issuing and structuring general obligation debt. The resolution that was adopted by the full board that authorized essentially proceeding with the financing that's been discussed was done in the context of general obligation bonds. So that preserves your ability to go as long as 20 years, but it's at your discretion as a group. And so as we were talking about it, you wanted to have a little bit of a conversation around, okay, what if we did you know, a number of different things. Now, that can be you know, a discussion that is almost never ending to some degree. So we wanted to try to put a few things together to give you some visual depictions as far as what things might look like using various structures. What we did was really try to limit it to some degree based upon what the previous conversations were around your proclivity to want to be relatively short in order to kind of save on interest expense, and also to understanding that some of the capital costs here are shorter lived in nature. But I want to also assure you that, you know, underlying the total structure, we can to some degree compartmentalize the different capital projects between the roads and bridges and the equipment, such that the equipment is really retired as rapidly as possible, because obviously that makes a lot of sense. You don't want to be financing things longer than their useful lives. So just to kind of revisit where we've been, right? We've been looking at about $4.25 million in capital financing in the form of general obligation debt that funds about $4.1 million of project costs. Trying to just deal in round numbers here. And our objective, I think walking away from today, would be to identify what your preferred structure is in terms of final term to maturity, but also understand that it doesn't have to be level payments either. If that's where we land, that's perfectly fine. But just because we might point to, say, a term that's 7 years out, 10 years out, we do have the latitude to kind of play around with the debt structure a little bit to accommodate whatever needs you might feel best suit you in your case. So just wanted to also remind everybody that you're perfectly fine from a borrowing capacity perspective. Again, you're limited under state law in terms of total amount of general obligation debt, but you have a substantial amount available. You have about half or more available, and that's to the tune in dollar figures of about $74 or $75 million. So in no way are we, coming close to any of your threshold limitations. There are other implications as far as the rating goes, but still, even then, you're not going to start to put any pressure on your rating metrics with what we're describing here. It's more about where do you want to be from a tax structure and levy perspective as we go forward. So also then too, that's good to have some reference as to what you're presently levying and scheduled to specifically for debt service. So think about this in the context of the total amount of your levy and what your total tax rate is, and then what proportion of that total is earmarked then for debt service, for general obligation debt. And I'll remind everybody again, the general obligation debt that you have outstanding, if you looked at that prior page, that's all the principal amounts that are due over time and remaining on those individual issues. A lot of that debt service is covered by the healthcare center. All right, so you're not levying for 100% of your general obligation debt service. So when you look at the graph on page 4, when you net out what the transfers are from the healthcare center to support their debt service, this is what remains and this is what is levied for. All right, so just to give you a little perspective, in 2022, you were right around $3 million in levy for debt service, and that equated to about $1.20 per thousand of value on an equalized basis. We had a little bit of a discussion, assessed and equalized. Equalized is more consistent over time, and so that's how we tend to look at things. But when you levy your taxes and spread them across tax base, they do get spread across assessed value, so there can be some uneven feel of that across your entire jurisdiction. In 23, debt service did go up, and that was largely related to a similar financing that was done in 2022, for which the first year of payment was in 2023. And so the levy for debt service went up approximately $750,000 to $3.7 million. And that equates to a tax rate for debt service of $1.32 per thousand. So that's up 12 cents per thousand. So I think you can do the math. It's about 10% year over year in terms of the tax rate or the tax impact in terms of your total tax rate for debt service. Just to kind of revisit on the considerations here, recall that we do have that latitude that I described in terms of both the final term of maturity and the structure. I'm not suggesting you go as long as 20 years. It is an option available to you. That is the max under law for GO debt. As you look forward in time, there's a decline from 32 to 33. All right, that relates to the fact that the last issue you did was 10 years in term, right? So then we drop off, and then you have another substantial decline, but it's out there quite a ways, and that relates to when the Justice Center financing drops off. Beyond that, you're relatively flat, okay? And that was understood when the decisions were made around prior financing discussions and what was done over a number of years. So then maybe I'll just pause quickly and see if there's any questions, because the next exercise is to kind of walk through some of the forward-looking estimates, and I'll build off of that a little bit too. They'll be kind of perfunctory, but you'll get my point here in a moment. So I'll just pause, see if there are any questions, comments.
I guess the question is.
Yep.
That 132 till 33. Now, when we're talking highway issues continuing, what's the ability to continue that 132 straight across? I know we have 20 years, but you can't
Yep.
extend the $5 million debt for, say, next year into that section.
You can, but why don't we look through the forward-looking ones, and that'll probably answer a good deal of your question in terms of how you might want to think about this. And understand, we're holding the values flat throughout the entire forecast
Right,
period.
I get, that's true.
You're
Right,
likely to
yeah.
have higher values over that
Right.
time, but how much and to what degree is anybody's guess. And
Okay.
personally, sometimes you see school districts count on some growth over time when they finance major projects. You see that less frequently in cities, villages, and counties. And values ebb and flow. So, I mean, I would suspect over the next 2 years, values would probably be fairly stagnant, just given the rapid increases of the last
Right,
roughly 2
exactly,
years. So,
yeah.
being conservative is a proper methodology when you're looking forward in time. So we just hold it at 0.
Okay.
Unlikely that's going to be the case, right? And so there will be some built-in tax relief through increases in valuation and growth, but to count on that can be a bit of a difficulty in trying to achieve, unless you know for sure something's going to happen, right? And anyone's guess. So looking at page 6, what we did was we took a couple different scenarios and applied some equal assumptions to them. So we looked at, what if you continue to do $3 million a year over the next few years? We really stopped at the next 2 because I think it'll be obvious, based upon our prior discussions, what that would ultimately end up looking like. And then we did what would $5 million a year look like consecutively over the next 2 years as well. So within that, we assumed you proceed with the issue that we've been talking about over the last few months, that you take on your 2023 financing, but structure it a little differently in each of these scenarios. So we'll start with looking at a 5-year repayment structure for both this year and future years' debt, and then a 7-year repayment structure in a similar fashion. You can go longer, and again, they don't need to be equal annual payments. So at the end of this, we can talk through how you might want to contemplate some of the aspects of forward-looking capital financing initiatives, and also understand too that we do have the ability, as we talked about early on, to kind of play around with the principle in a way to structure the debt so that you have higher payments in later years than you do in earlier years. The end result will always be that you will pay higher interest expense as a result of that. But as you can see here, if your objective is really to kind of manage the overall levy and tax rate, that may be the price you pay to achieve the outcome that you want. All right. So let's look on number 6 here, page 6. Again, we've got our structure related to the current issue, right? I'm looking at red, but the base bars are your existing levy for debt service, and then we're adding on year after year. So we've got 5-year repayment structure on the current debt. Again, that's $4.25 million. Then we've got consecutively for the next 2 years, another $3 million also with 5-year repayment schedules. Below that is the same scenario, except we're using 7-year repayment structures for all of those individual issues. And so obviously as a result, you can see the steepness of the top line is reduced to some degree with the bottom structure here, where we're kind of smoothing things out a little bit, which doesn't fully take advantage of the drop from 32 to 33 just because of the timing aspects. and the 7-year repayment structure. But you can see that is still available to you to some degree to smooth things out even further. So with the 5-year level payments, you reach a max levy in the course of a few years of about $6 million, and that equates to a tax rate at current values of $2.02. So put that in the context of the roughly $3.75 million we're looking at for this year, right, and the $1.32 per thousand. And so you can see that that escalates rather quickly, right, when you're layering on top without any structuring or extending the life of the debt. If you move down then to the 7-year repayment structure, clearly you get some relief from the prior scenario. Again, the cost of that relief is additional interest expense. There's just no doubt about that anytime you go out further. The max levy in that scenario ends up being about $5.4 million before it begins to decline, and the max tax rate, again, in that scenario is $1.82 per thousand, or up about 50 cents from where you're at right now. So again, as you're looking at these, I want you to also contemplate the fact that these don't just need to be level, right? If you're moving forward in time where there's drops, we can backfill to some degree. We can reduce some principal, and we can defer some of the principal towards the end of the structure and tag on to smooth things out a little and flatten them out a little if that's something that you want to see that can be achieved.
So back to the same question.
Yep.
If we truly, and maybe this isn't what we want to talk about right now, but we're truly gonna keep fixing roads, we're definitely gonna have to pay more interest and extend it out farther. There's no question about that, right? I mean,
That's up
I
for
don't
all
wanna
of
pay
you
interest
to,
any more than anybody else, but if we wanna fix roads, we're gonna have to spend a lot of our money on interest, basically.
we're still at people are talking about, rates being up, but that's really on the short end, right? So 2-3-year rates are at their highest levels in a very long time.
Okay.
As you get further out in time, we're actually in a reasonable place and less than average over the last roughly 10 years. So if you were to ask me, how would you look on a 10-year financing, it's going to be higher than what it was early last year, but it's not going to be dramatically higher. So yes, a longer term will always result in additional interest expense. There is no escaping that. So if that's kind of your calculus in terms of how you want to think about it, there's always a price to pay for flexibility and trying to manage the tax rate. And so there's trade-offs. And in that case, yes, additional interest cost would be the trade-off in that regard to try to achieve the outcome of a more rapid pace of improvements to the road and bridge infrastructure. And Paul, it might be useful as we kind of talk about this. I'm trying to remember what your total levy amount was, and the proportion of, say, debt service to the total is a reasonable indicator of kind of how much of your levy is really comprised of fixed cost. And so those things do come into consideration when you're looking at the rating. Again, I'm not overly concerned about the total borrowing capacity. Every year you're paying down a substantial amount. So even adding debt, you're going to be in a roughly net neutral position under most of these scenarios, if not almost declining with the $3 million versus the $5 million. But I think in terms of what your total levy is, how much of that is debt service is a useful indicator as to how a third party might look at you from a credit perspective. So don't need it right now, but as you're thinking about it, if you have that.
I was trying to do a little in my head, but it's not going to get there because
Sure.
we're still using some of that premium money.
Right, but
Offset?
we knew that we were going to have that. So when you
Well, that's already
think
calculated.
about that as a revenue source, we structured the debt to kind of
Go around that.
we take it into consideration when we do things on the day of sale, so that from my perspective, that's a non-issue from a revenue and expense perspective.
I think we only have one more year's
Sure.
worth of that, yeah.
That's taken into consideration in the bottom bars in terms of how the levy for debt service is structured. Your existing levy recognizes that you have that as a revenue source. So let's look at then the $5 million scenarios. Again, 5-year repayment and 7-year repayment. Shouldn't be surprised that the everything gets a little larger in magnitude here, right? So 5 years, level payments get to a max amount of about 6.85 million, 6.86, and a max tax rate of $2.31 per thousand. You can see in the 5-year scenario, we peak out and then drop fairly rapidly as a result of how the structure looks. And then in the 7-year example, 6 million roughly is about where you arrive at a max levy perspective, and then max tax rate gets you to a little over $2 per thousand. And again, with the larger numbers and these repayment structures, you can see that, you know, both slopes of the line, you know, on the front and back of it, both increase and decrease a little more rapidly there. So again, we're not necessarily taking advantage of all of the dips as we go along, just that equal annual payment structure is what's being applied here.
But I'm gonna come back to the same thing
Yeah.
again, so. If we go with a 5-year, which I think would make the most sense, but you're gonna be visiting us again next year with the same scenarios, correct? With the highway issue?
That part is really up to all of you, right, in terms of how you communicate to your department heads as far as, hey, we're gonna do this year. This makes a lot of assumptions, right? You're not obligated to do the same exact thing next year, whether it be the same dollar amount or 3 million or 5 million or 5 years or 7 years, right? This is really to kind of inform all of you as to, well, if this was the trajectory, this would be the outcome. And the thoughts that you're having are exactly what I'm trying to elicit in terms of, if we want to move forward with the plan we're on, these are the steps we're going to have to take to potentially manage the impacts. Or you make the determination that we need to borrow less, or we need to pause for a year and come back the next year. I don't have that answer for all of you. That's what we're going to use the tool to help have a better understanding. Because number one, first and foremost, doesn't necessarily have to be today, but walking away from this discussion, we should be trying to assemble thoughts and ideas around what do you want this debt issue to look like in the context of what your future plans over the next roughly 2, 3, 4 years. It's very tough to get much further out in time. As you can see, if we just keep stacking, you're going to have to deal with the repercussions of that. Or we can manage around what potentially you want to do. And the point about the amount of debt service in relationship to your total levy is once you start to exceed about 25%, in this case, Standard & Poor's, or now S&P, that's a number that they look at from a rating perspective, that it's a barrier to continuing on the pace that you're on in terms of being able to add more is going to be a negative factor. And so then what else do we look at in the kind of the matrix of things that affect your rating that we can point to say, well, we're going to overcome that for whatever reason. So they start to look at those things more and more. You're not there yet, but if you just keep adding, you will be. And so I'm just trying to give you a flavor for how you might want to consider the next few years, the debt structure, but also what do you want the current issue to look like to accommodate what you'd like to see over these next few years. Again, there's no magic to 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years until you get to the point of thinking about over the next few years, how are we handling things. Excuse me. As far as how the future would unfold, then again, we're looking to come out of this committee with a recommendation on the structure of the debt. So that means both what do you want to see from a final term to maturity perspective, but also the structure itself in terms of do you want to see a level payment coming away from this? We can build a few different scenarios if you'd like. This isn't exhaustive by any means, but ultimately, if we throw too many variables into the mix, it almost makes it harder to make decisions. So kind of limiting our viewpoint is trying to distill to a decision set that can continue to drive the discussion forward. The intention would be to take your recommendation then and memorialize it on our end in the form of what we call a pre-sale report. So before we put all of the offering documents and the various legal documents together with your bond counsel, we would go before the board, present them with what you have decided from this is what we recommend perspective, talk them through that. There's no formal action that's needed in that regard. The resolution associated with authorizing the issuance of the debt has already occurred, and that stands for 5 years, so you're still well within that window, obviously. So that's more informational at that point. But walking away from that, everybody behind the scenes is doing a number of things. Your staff are doing a number of things as well to get prepared for the actual sale of the obligations. And by sale, it's somewhat like a bid environment, right? We package the whole thing up on your behalf, and we go out to the capital markets and present the transaction to dealers who essentially bid on it in terms of their fee as well as the interest rates they attach to it. Who then, and whoever wins, that they're selling it to their investor customers. And so that would then occur on a board meeting date, the morning of, and we would come back with a binding resolution that the board could act on that would essentially lock in all of the rates and terms at that point. And effectively, you will have a binding purchase and sale agreement, and we would close a few weeks after that. So, I suspect as you move over the next few months here, as far as dollars go, they will probably start to be spent in a little greater amounts as folks get ready to prepare for the construction season. So funding would be needed at some point, but I'm not sure we're at a stage where I would say this is how the calendar has to look to get you dollars by when you need it, so you have some latitude in there. But ultimately, this group will have to make some decisions on the final structure, incorporating what you might want to see from here's what we think we're going to do over the next few years perspective. So I will pause there. Yes.
Okay, I'm probably missing it here someplace, but where is the debt, the upcoming debt, where is that in this chart?
Yeah, so if you're looking at...
And what did you use for a number, because it hasn't been determined yet?
I used the roughly 4
We did have a
point...
number,
yeah.
it was in the budget. I didn't bring the budget with me.
The amount of the capital projects is like 4.16 million.
But
Yeah.
where is that included in your chart here?
Yeah, so it's assumed that you issue 4.25 million, and as you're looking at pages 6 and 7, you see where the debt service jumps up in 2024,
Okay,
right? The first stacked column
Okay.
over the base numbers.
Okay.
There's 5 years and then 7 years, so it's in there.
okay. Yep.
In these two scenarios, are you figuring for doing the same thing next year, or is this just a one-shot deal?
No, so the 4.25 million is in there, and then on the 2 pages, the first page assumes that you do 3 million the next 2 years, essentially 5 years and 7 years variations, top and bottom graphs, and then the second page is 5 million in the same scenarios. So
So the
5 years and 7 years, yeah.
the upcoming, oh, go ahead.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but the upcoming current dollars are
They're baked in.
based on a 5-year payback, or what was that, how did you determine in this chart for
Yep.
the current debt?
So it's 5 years and 7 years. So we just stuck, instead of trying to
Okay.
play around too awfully much, right? We
Okay.
just assumed the same thing over the course of 3 years, other than the dollar amount, right? So the
Okay,
dollar amount
okay.
changes because this year you're
Yep.
looking at 4.25 million
Yep.
based upon the current finance plan.
Okay,
But then potentially, what would you do going forward, and what would they look like?
okay.
Again, it's 3 million in the first 2 examples, one at 5 years, one at 7 years. We also changed the structure of the current financing in both of those scenarios to 5 years and 7 years. The second set of scenarios is 5 million over the next succeeding 2 years after this year. Again, 5 years and 7 years. And so in all occasions, every single debt issue from 2023 through 2025 have the same repayment
Okay,
structure.
okay.
5 years and
Yep.
7 years.
It just clicked.
Got it.
Okay. So-
I guess also I probably should have prefaced at the beginning, we did put out the all-call for any major capital projects that might be known to the various departments, and I'm not sure we got anything that would materially impact any of these forecasts that needed to be built in.
I don't remember, did we make copies of these, or we didn't? Good. Then I am now. I know I gave it to David and David, but the rest. I must not have sent it to you then
Anything I
either.
saw, basically highway was the one with the,
Right. I think it was like a few hundreds of thousands of dollars, which isn't going to dramatically
That's another one.
change any of what you're looking at.
You- Yep, and then this one. And this one. And if you keep going up, then Brian will get one too. I think I just sent it to the two Davids. I didn't send it to Brian. So,
thank you.
there's extras, just throw them to the side.
Everybody has one?
Brian, you kept one?
I'm okay. I just like the big number. I don't need the granular detail. So.
Yep.
Well, that's fun. 230.
Okay.
Maybe I'll also just emphasize again, whatever decisions are made around the debt issue that's kind of front and center. I know we've built them all out kind of uniformly, but there's nothing stopping you from saying, all right, well, 5 years makes sense right now in the current context. The next year, or the next financing potentially would be 7 years, understanding that we would kind of structure some of the debt to maybe more back end and wrap around what you're looking at to minimize the initial impact, and so on, right? So there's different flavors, and we can always update things whenever we have the subsequent discussion on the next round of financing. So this is more to give you a sense is if you just went on a particular trajectory, what would happen as a result of that.
But you passed these rules and technology, the rules are articles.
Right now, you have it in the ARPA,
Right.
but if you wanted to borrow, we take it away from the ARPA and it would go into this borrowing situation.
Yeah, she's
ARPA.
just suggesting we use ARPA, but that doesn't mean we have to use
Right,
ARPA.
right.
Why wouldn't we use ARPA?
Well, we may have other
Well, when you-
obligations first.
When you get to that
Well, no, I
update, you'll see.
That page looks pretty bad already.
Did you hand out the ARPA one?
Yeah.
Okay, so they already see it.
So, Any
So I don't know if you
discussion?
want to talk a
Any-
little bit about ARPA right now, too. That is that we only have about 1.8 million left to allocate, and we've been requested 12 million for that 1.8. So, not all the projects are going to be ARPA.
So we're supposed to make a recommendation today so that we can talk about this at county board,
Right.
I would guess.
On the financing you're talking? Yeah.
Is number one enough?
I don't think so.
So, there's no use looking at one, right?
I think just by my own opinion, I think we gotta go with 2A. I don't like going beyond 5 years either.
Yeah, and those comments I keep making, it's just that the board's gotta be reminded,
Yeah.
this doesn't get us past another year, basically. If we're gonna keep this road thing as presented here, correct? Is that what you're doing to that?
That's what, yes.
Showing us that that's already been decided, basically, where those roads are
But-
gonna be done.
No, it hasn't been
It's
decided.
not
No, it has
decided.
not
It's-
been
No,
decided.
no, that's,
their
that's just the
plan.
Your
long-term.
question is exactly what we need to be talking about right here and now.
Right.
Do we want to keep spending approximately $5 million a year on roads?
Exactly.
If we don't, then that dramatically changes this payback structure. I mean, it could, right, Ryan? I mean, we could do some different things if we didn't keep borrowing $5 million a year on roads.
There's very few things that are carved into stone as far as the county goes. When you issue debt, you will levy the taxes for it, and you have bound all future boards. But as far as your capital spending plan, I mean,
Yeah,
that
we're
those are-
asking you
yeah.
questions that you have no control
Yeah,
over,
right.
I understand.
Correct. So, as far as, my assumptions are that you proceed with this year. And then, so what does the structure of that look like?
Right.
But this is also a conversation around how do you want to potentially put yourself, from a financing perspective and capital projects perspective as you go into the future. And so you'll have to obviously collaborate with the other committees on what it is you want to do in that regard. But you should also be communicating your intent on a bit of a multi-year plan. So even having that discussion doesn't necessarily commit you to anything, right? The full board's going to have to take things up and vote on them. But if you have an intent of how you want to proceed in some fashion, the current debt structure will be somewhat prohibitive to some things or better suit other stances in terms of what the impacts will be over a number of years.
Yeah, but I'm gonna ask you, that max levy, if we will go with number 2, and we keep up with the highway, it won't be as much because we are paying back on the building. But our max levy next year, after we ask for another 5, is gonna more than likely be more. Is that a correct assumption?
It will have to be, right? You'll
Yeah.
have to increase the
Okay.
levy to accommodate
Right.
additional debt service.
I mean, so we got to decide if we're going to keep spending $5
Right.
million a
Yes,
year.
yes, I know.
So
Right.
the way on that sheet, the way it plays out, I put this in a spreadsheet, there's $24 million through 2027 that's being requested to
Right.
build roads. A different way of maybe looking at this is a road lasts, we heard, about 30 years, right? I mean, they're certainly not in good shape after 20 years, but they last about 30 years. If we cut this back in half, is it really gonna make a dramatic effect on the roads? I would suggest no. Now, are we gonna be digging a hole? Maybe.
But if we cut it in half, we might be able to stay even because of our payback is.
Exactly what I
Right,
was getting at.
Exactly.
Right.
So if we make it at 2.5, we could survive.
I'm sorry, highway department, you wanna build $5 million worth of roads every year, but let's build half of that, and that's what we're gonna live
And
with.
because of
We
our
could-
payback, we would be fine.
Well,
Awful close.
it's a lot better than 5, because how are we going to continue to finance, $24 million in the next 5 years on top of the building, so. Pretty difficult. I mean, we could even do something like, okay, you already got plans for 2024 already, but instead of 5 million, let's do 3 million, and the next year after that, let's do 2 million, and then we can revisit it again, do we want to go up again in that 30?
Maybe because of payback, we might be able to, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Our debt, I should say, not payback.
So basically, you're suggesting, if anything, 1A. Option 1A.
Oh, I mean, potentially, yeah.
1A has actually got the 4.2 or whatever it is for this year in the number?
All of them have the 4.25 million from this year. It's just about what things look like on a
If we
going
do
forward
1/8,
basis.
Paul, we're gonna have one heck of a time in October, aren't we?
At budget time, you mean?
Yeah. If we only have 3 million to work with.
Well, I would just basically change this.
Right, it definitely will change the projects that the highway was gonna do.
Projects is what will change.
But we need to tell the highway department now, just so they don't start making plans for next year. Because by budget time, it's already too late. That's what happened this year. We're like, oh, let's cut back on that. And they said, well, we can. We're already committed.
Right.
You know.
Okay.
And if we're talking 2024, highway already has I was just looking through, has some engineering costs already in there that they'll have to cover somehow.
Well, that's why I suggest maybe we do half. At least they can cover everything that they've already committed to and do some road construction. But,
Just for the good news part, the DOT has promised us more money than, because of the $7 billion surplus, which could,
another reason not to go after the money now and see
Not
what
have
we
to go
maybe
after
can
the
get
4 or 5
something.
million.
Okay.
Right. That's
Yeah,
where my
good
mind was
point.
coming from, yeah.
They've got $7 billion to do something with.
Not to measure, maybe we'll get some federal funds too, not just.
Yeah, Al had just told me the other day when I talked to him that with the new federal stuff, that we've got a project that qualifies for somewhere's over $2 million.
right,
Project that, it's a grant, so you have to write and apply, but that we meet the qualifications for at least asking. So that would be a big help 2 years out.
did everybody get the email
Is
that
that
Paul
the one
sent
he
out?
talks about in
Just
here?
No.
Off the
That's a
record, did
different
everybody
one.
get the email that Paul sent out?
Let me see which one.
Which one?
No, because this was put out
Current
before.
commissioner?
It's for
I did not.
2024,
When did you send that?
20%.
I thought you sent it to all the,
Oh, I didn't send it to the.
Let's see, I gotta go back and look.
oh, the highway committee.
He
Yeah,
told
highway
me,
committee.
but I didn't get an
Oh,
email.
okay.
That,
Is that the same?
Yeah.
Which is another maybe good reason
I
why we
believe,
should.
yep, that
let
is
him
the
get his
one,
feet
and that
wet,
might
whoever-
qualify for,
right?
for the
And-
whole,
and
the whole
decide
thing
what they
under another
want us to
program
do.
if this one fails.
Okay.
Yeah, if I heard right.
Well, for Brian's sake of having him stand there, should we
That's what I told him, was take a seat.
move on to?
I'm all right, trust me.
I have a question for Brian. I think I know the answer, but I want to confirm. So let's say we went with, like 1A, just as an example. And down the road, a year or two, we decided, we want to borrow more than the 3 million. We wanted to go back to 5 or 6 or something. Couldn't we pay off that debt with a new debt and then start over?
It depends, of course, on how we access the capital. If you were going to go out to the market and borrow for 5 years, we could have a prepayment feature baked in to allow you on or after a specific date to pay it off at face value. And that doesn't mean like go grab cash and pay it off. That would include refinancing and potentially restructuring, or doing the same amortization but then tying some additional new money into it and combining. That's achievable. There are occasions where if you tend to get aggressive, you might pay a little bit of a premium to do that, right? If I'm the investor and I'm buying your debt as an investment, certainty is something I'm willing to pay for. Uncertainty, you're going to pay for, right? So there's always a little trade. In the current environment, you would not pay, a hefty cost to achieve that. Another avenue would be potentially bank financing, which we have leveraged in the past on a number of occasions. There's some economics that are involved in terms of kind of doing the math. Right now, the capital markets provide lower costs of capital than bank financing generally, even though the upfront costs are a little cheaper for bank financing. But a lot of times we can get away with full prepayment privileges without any rate impact on bank financing. At about 4.25 million, I think you have a good audience for bank financing, including local and regional banks, not just the big players. Some get kind of tapped out at certain numbers as far as like lending to any one borrower. You're great credit, so you attract a lot of interest in the bank market, but some banks just can't can't lend more than $2-3 million to any one party. So you can go either route. If we go to the capital markets direction, we could ask for a prepayment feature that's a little more aggressive, potentially, and then see if we can achieve what you're describing. But what is your intent with, is it potentially kind of recasting the debt at that point, or basically having the option of doing that available to you? Because I don't think you're going to really save anything as far as like
Well,
interest
recasting
costs
it
goes.
because let's say we come across some, state or federal funds that allow us to, accelerate our payoff and then get into some newer debt.
Sure.
At whatever the new rates at that time.
I'm not, there'd be some math involved there, right? Are you currently borrowing at lower rates than what your existing debt is at? Would it be better to pay off debt or borrow, or whatever the case may be? But I'm not a grant expert, but a lot of times use of that money to pay off existing debt is not allowed. That's generally the case, but it could be kind of this fungible pot of money too. But specifically, in most occasions, you can't take that money and pay off your prior debts.
No, but we could finance additional money to pay off prior debt if the rider's built into the loan.
To some degree, yes. But you would only do that if it made logical economic sense in terms of what your debt structure looks like, or if you could save money, which I would argue is going to be tough as you go forward. Just rates are still fairly low, and they'd have to drop materially to get you to economic savings. So if it was all like there's no rules attached to anything, then I understand what you're describing. It gets a little more complex when there's strings attached to money. Those sorts of
Yeah, I
things.
mean, otherwise, we take out the loan and we're stuck for however long the payments are, period. We can't do anything with it. It is what it is.
The shorter it is, the more likely that scenario is for any number of reasons. But if your intent is, well, we'd like the opportunity to do something let's say we could do like 5-year debt, but in year 2 or 3, we want that opportunity. You can do that, but it may come with some consequences. In this case, I think they'd be fairly nominal. If you just wanted to go out and borrow for roads and bridges on a 5-year basis, most of the time I would tell you that call feature, that prepayment feature has no value to you, and so let's just go out and make it non-callable, because the likelihood of refinancing for savings is next to zero, and the only real value is potentially for full prepayment or partial for full prepayment or restructuring. But that doesn't mean it has zero value in total. So if you really wanted to look at that, we could try to quantify you how much more are you going to pay in additional interest expense to enjoy that privilege. And it's probably not that awfully much, but it wouldn't be zero.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, how many of us here would not want to pay off a car early if we came across some money or could refinance in a way that helped us do
You may,
overall? I mean,
you may have other higher cost debt that you would want to apply that money to. In fact, I would argue something like the Justice Center has some, we got great rates, but it's probably got, I don't want to get in the weeds on like coupons and yields and everything, but you may find that you would apply it to something else, but it would still have the same effect of potentially reducing future years' levies.
Right.
So you're still getting the same result.
Information I'm hearing, I'm thinking I'm leaning towards a recommendation of 1A.
And when I hear that, all I hear is basically that you want a 5-year structure. Nothing else associated with any of these scenarios are you committed to in any fashion. So it's more just an exercise in kind of getting this kind of discussion going and rolling. So if you want a 5-year structure on this year's current debt, I think it is in your interest to continue the conversation on the planning side of things. So this was to get to the point of making some decisions now, but everything that you're describing should be continuing conversations amongst the committees to think about the next few years and how you want to position yourself from a capital spending perspective.
Exactly.
We need to have this on the agenda every month.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if there's any more departments that come up with capital requests, we can keep adding it to the spreadsheet that I've got going together, and we can say, okay, here's what it's looking like. But
And we can model anything you want. Having some certainty around this year makes it easier then to build future scenarios, because we don't have to kind of guess on what this current one is. And then there's also nothing wrong with showing you some options that could potentially defer some of the principal. We wrap around to mitigate the upfront impact. You may like that, you may not. So I didn't attach specific numbers just because I feel like sometimes the more variables I introduce almost kind of burdens this sort of discussion. So, you know, having that knowledge is helpful because now I feel like I can introduce some additional, more granular detail so that from a cost-benefit type of decision-making, you can then make those more informed decisions as you look forward in time. And now it's easier to go more than, say, 3 years. We can go 3 to 5 or whatever you'd like. We can model anything you want. I just don't want to throw 75 scenarios at you. And I mean, it's enough to look at 4. So we can go A to Z, but you know, we got to try to minimize the data sets too.
So we still have to get the full board agreement that that's the model we want to go.
Right,
Right.
obviously. Are we asking Brian to come back on Monday, or are we gonna have the answers?
On Monday.
It's a week.
Well,
Right.
the 20th.
Come back with what?
Well,
To talk to the whole board.
The full board?
Maybe,
You can tell me not to come. My intent was to present the pre-sale report that I described and then also field any questions that arise.
You
as
were
a
already
result of it.
intending to come.
You can tell me not to, but it's on my calendar, so don't worry about me. So,
Right.
and again, I'll just reiterate, there is no specific action item unless you want to set it up that way. So from a board perspective, they don't need to necessarily approve this part. If you want them to take action, you can ask them to do that. Otherwise, it's more informational. So just kind of managing that discussion, I think, will be important too.
If we can get it through the full board, it would make budget much easier next fall.
yeah, I'm guessing that for your end of it, they know you've been here. We're exec finance committee, I would have to assume they're gonna support us.
I mean, it's possible somebody might look at it and say, well, your max tax rate at 202 versus 182, why wouldn't we go with 7 years? If they're not as concerned about the total out of pocket.
The next one could be 7 years if you want, and we could kind of back end, I mean, if that's something else you want to look at, we can have all of those discussions. But if I'm guessing at the current year, that makes it more difficult, and I got to throw like 15 different things at you. So, so we can get more dialed in now at this stage. But I wouldn't intend to get to this level of detail with the full board. It's going to be a little more perfunctory and focus on the transaction itself. And if they have questions around, well, they wanted to hear about, we looked forward in time, we made some assumptions, we have an understanding of kind of what the path would be based upon particular scenarios, and so this is why we made this recommendation. That will probably all come up in conversation and would be helpful for them to understand.
So do we want to convey anything to the full board out of this discussion? Like, we're looking at this one, 5-year, blah, 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 and to would point to a direction or not?
Maybe you convey, I mean, again, I think it's imperative that there's a larger discussion as you proceed.
Right.
Maybe you convey that, because really, just because you wanted a particular outcome for this issue doesn't mean you've somehow ordained what the future is
right,
going to look
right,
like,
yeah.
right? So there should be some ongoing conversation, and I think that's the most important aspect of what the board probably should understand, but that's just my opinion.
Well, that's where I was going, that rather than say, we as exec finance are saying, this is the one we want to do, please support us. That's not what we're after at this point, or is it?
That's going to be how the agenda item is posed to the board to some degree, right? So presenting it as a recommendation, you can have them either essentially consent or just tell them it's informational. That's out of my purview as far as how you engage with
I
them.
think that's what we'd be asking them, and we're gonna say, let's fund our obligations with the 3 million versus a 5 million debt structure.
Right.
And that, everybody knows, that means we're not going to be spending the kind of money on roads that,
Right.
has been proposed by highway.
But then at the same time, we have to include that we're going to be financing 4 million this year, 4.2, whatever it is.
I think we already did that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
we
The board has authorized it, yes.
authorized it, right, and it's in your budget.
Yep.
We haven't done the finals on it.
Right.
Financing.
But that financing is where, you hear?
He's got it structured in here.
It's in there.
It's
That's,
in there.
okay, that's what you talked about earlier.
That's, Yep.
So I mean, as far as the message is, we took what we're doing this year and thought about, right, what kind of a structure we want, understanding that we will likely be doing things in the future, but how much and to what degree, right, is more the bigger question. And so that was, the decision around the 5 years was to some degree arrived at because of how you want to conduct yourself, or at least what your intent is over these next few years. And then, obviously, you can't make those decisions immediately. That requires additional conversations and then potentially action of the board through the budget and any subsequent borrowing associated with it.
so at this stage, we don't need to do anything in the actual, this is what we're going to do thing today. We're just saying, we're moving it on.
Cut in stone there anyway, except that we
Right,
have.
we're moving it on for discussion to the
Yeah.
full board.
Yeah,
Is
so if-
really all we're.
What I'm hearing is that you want a 5-year level annual.
Well, that's where I was getting at. Is that
Okay.
the consensus?
Well,
Or do we need a vote?
David,
Do we need?
you were
where do we-
talking 7 to save the 20 cents? or-
That's what I was looking at. It keeps that tax a little bit more flat.
There's two ways you're looking at it.
Yep.
Do we worry about the tax, max tax rate, or are we worrying about the long-term total cost that we're gonna have to continue taxing on? I can go either way. But my mind says go with the 5-year, the 1A.
I think we're in agreement. That was your
One,
motion.
1A, yes.
And also, just to be clear, you don't hit the $2.02 until 2026, right? So from 23 to 24, you go from like $1.32 to like $1.60 something, somewhere in there, based upon the last time we were all in front of you and kind of walked you through the assumptions. So it takes a number of years to get up to the $2 plus in tax rate. So the immediate impact is less. It's not zero, certainly,
sounds
but
better
it's
already.
less.
The public knows we're building a building, they can see it, and they know, I think they've heard about the highways, so they know it's coming, I think.
Another way of looking at it and putting a twist on it is, look, we're gonna strap ourselves now, but that means we're going to have to hold our purse strings really tight the next 2 or 3 years, and everybody knows, we're probably not gonna be building as many things or adding as many services as we would have because of the way we are positioned with the new building. So,
There you go, yes.
that's how I would sell it.
I'll second his number 1A motion.
Okay, that was a motion from you for 1A and a second over here, or was the?
It was from
Motion
There.
from-
Either way, yeah, I guess I
Okay.
did.
Motion and a second.
Okay, motion and second to proceed towards the 1A proposal.
Yes.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Thank you all.
Yep, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Bigger than that. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, now if I'm reading my arrows right, we're moving to item 14, carry over unspent jail funds. Sure.
Do you move the closed session item?
Yep.
So this, I think, will be short and painful.
Painful, you said?
After reviewing the budget this morning, I wanted to do that before I came in here. There's 4 parts to my budget, and I have a jail budget, which it appears there's going to be about $70,000 total at the bottom line, that there's going to be about $70,000 left in that jail budget. Courthouse security is going to be about $4,600 4,600. Where did I put that now? Well, and dispatch is going to be another maybe 4,800 under budget. So those three alone will be under budget. It's not enough to cover the cost of the dispatch console equipment. So at this time, I think I'm going to be better served to remove that request for the resolution. The sheriff's administration budget is the fourth piece. As it looks right now, that one is going to be about probably 95,000 over budget, and that's due to a retirement in the year, fuel costs, and health insurance that increased during the year. The employee selection changed during the year. There are some revenues that offset that, and when the audit is done, I'm confident that there's going to be more than that $74,000 going back into the general fund. But it was suggested at the last meeting that it might not be a bad idea to just let the budget ride and then come back with a resolution just to pull the money out of the general fund to purchase the dispatch equipment. And I think that's the route I'm going to move. I'll bring it to my standing committee, the law enforcement committee, this month, and then hopefully have something different for you in the March meeting then, if that makes sense to you guys. So, Rick, I know you put a lot of effort into the resolution, Paul, you too, but I think we're better served by pulling that back and going the other route.
So basically what you're saying is your budget is looking like it's going to be flat, just
Pretty,
different
yes.
places, so you're going to let it play out, and then we'll decide how to do the dispatch thing.
I think that's the better route to go.
Makes sense.
So, and I did, Bridget, at the last meeting, you suggested you did a quick internet search and you found a couple companies that make dispatch equipment. I did survey all the sheriffs, and a number of those that did reconstruction or construction or remodeling projects used primarily three different vendors. The two you mentioned were not part of them, so I had the construction manager reach out to the other two, and one of them returned a bid, and it was significantly higher. And so we're probably still going to be looking at that 74,000, but it gives me a little bit more time to see if the other one will respond too. So I'll take this to law enforcement in the January meeting and then bring it back to exec finance in March, if that's all right.
So do we need a motion to postpone this to the next meeting? Is that how, or do we just ignore it, or what?
I'll make a motion to postpone the next meeting.
Yeah, just leave it on the agenda.
Just leave it on the agenda.
All right.
Leave it on the agenda, yeah, okay. Do we need to motion to, or just ignore it? Okay?
And the quote for the current bid I have, the low bid is good till March 31st, so.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay?
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you. The next one that comes up is the food pantry issue, but the chair needs a 3-minute break.
Oh,
So,
Starting,
hurry. You wasted 30 seconds already.
So on Deb's, she didn't really have any money, like noted in there. Was it Deb's? Yeah, Sukla, on the capital request. Did she have?
Didn't get any from her.
Yeah.
Or did she send something?
Yo, she sent, you were on it.
I gotta go backwards and look.
Well, you forwarded it to me.
I forwarded it to you?
Yeah. Deb sent it to you and Dave and John, and then you forwarded it to me. You said, got one more.
Oh, nuts, I didn't look at that one. I had the other three. The three that I did. And then you said something about a spreadsheet. I was looking for, did you create a spreadsheet?
I'm doing it right now, right,
Okay,
because
your email said something about print this off, but there was no attachment.
no, so what,
Okay.
the IT part was on the back of that, what you handed out, so I just used that to put it. So I'm good, you don't have to respond to that. But I don't see anything here on Deb's. There's nothing. All right, no, there's nothing in there. There's nothing, it's just nice to know information.
Figure out what's going on.
Well, the ADRC, she says the ADRC, 1 to 2 year capital improvements with Human Services Department, which includes ADRC, will need to be
Okay, we're
remodeling to
back
bring
up.
back ADRC. Well, that's
Food
part of
pantry, resolution
nothing.
donation of to the Trempealeau County Food Pantry. Yep.
We got Lori and I don't. Oh, there you go. So we got 3 people on this.
Perfect.
Okay, welcome. And I'm not quite sure there is a resolution before us. Do we want to start with information?
Don't you
or-
have, you should have that in your packet, don't they?
Yeah.
The resolution?
That
Oh.
and the,
Yeah.
Just go ahead and read that.
read the resolution? Okay. Financial assistance for Trempealeau County Food Pantry. Whereas Trempealeau County Food Pantry is an organization that operates out of the old Trempealeau County Healthcare Center facility, and whereas since arriving at its current location, the pantry has assisted families with emergency food needs, and whereas the pantry is operated by numerous volunteers who have donated hours of volunteer time in the past, and whereas the need for the pantry services has increased significantly over the past years, as a result, the pantry has added additional freezers to store more food for distribution. And whereas due to added freezers, the cost to operate the pantry have increased, in particular the electrical used to operate the additional freezers. And whereas the Trempealeau County Healthcare Center has been covering the electricity costs on behalf of the pantry but is unable to continue covering this expense, and whereas the pantry provides valuable service to Trempealeau County, taking on the electricity expense would be a significant burden and adversely impact the services that it provides. And whereas the pantry estimates that its monthly electric bill is approximately $600 a month and is requesting that Trempealeau County cover the electrical expense in order for the pantry to maintain its current level of services. Now, be it resolved that the Trempealeau County Board of Supervisors hereby appropriates $7,200 from this general fund to cover the electricity expenses of the pantry for each of the calendar years 22 and 2023. Be it further resolved that the Trempealeau County Board of Supervisors hereby appropriates $7,200 annually through the levy to cover the electrical expenses of the pantry for 2024 and each year going forward. Introduced by Exec Finance if and when we sign it. So with that, I guess to get started, we need a motion to approve to start the conversation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Now, floor is yours to talk to us.
You want to introduce yourself, Dave?
Good morning. My name is David McRae. I'm the chairman of the Trempealeau County Food Pantry. I gotta, excuse my voice, I got a sore throat. I made up a brief review of the history of the pantry. And I affirm what the resolution has stated. I want to draw your attention to the January distribution of 2023. Based on that was very concerning. In years past, the January distribution was kind of a index of the year coming, and multiplied by 12, it was never more than, never greater than 1/12 of that calculation. And I added how much more, or how much more than the estimate on January actually turned out. January 2023, we served 801 people. That's up 44% from the average of the past 2 years. Projecting that out, we expect for the year somewhere between 9,000 and 11,000 people, averaging maybe 10,000. That's really significant. The question is was that an anomaly? I'm concerned that it's not. The food stamp program is going to eliminate or terminate the COVID allowance that has been in place the last couple of years or however long it was. And so that will impact our families' budgets and probably very well could bring out more people, just as one of the outstanding factors that could validate this January distribution number. Because of this, we will have to utilize all of our units. We had hoped that when we got the outside walk-in freezer, we could terminate or retire some of the smaller units because that would take its place. We no longer can do that. We will be having to utilize everything we got and maybe looking for more space and storage, refrigeration, et cetera, if possible. We are just about maxed out. We can maybe feed 1,000 people a month, given our present equipment and storage space. Beyond that, we are really challenged to do any more. Are there any other questions?
Have you, has your organization applied for other grant funds from state or federal?
We have, for equipment purposes, not for food. We've gotten some equipment this past year to help accommodate the extra load of that the distribution has burdened us with. So, but not as far as anything to help with electricity or anything like that.
And how is the organization incorporated? Is it a public corporation, private corporation?
A 501c3 nonprofit.
Okay. How many other food pantries are in the Trempealeau County area?
There's almost one community food pantry in each of the communities, except like Ettrick doesn't have one. Independence is kind of hit and miss.
Trempealeau is very
So
small, it's like a couple shelves.
we're the only pantry in the county that is utilizing or been given the emergency food assistance program through USDA. So we get, part of our food comes from the USDA. 80,000 pounds of food before, now it's down to 60,000. So, but our clientele is going up, so we have to try to make up for that disparity.
So on the I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, continue, go ahead.
On the resolution, it's talking about repayment from 2022. Haven't those bills been paid already?
They were by the healthcare center.
Okay, so why would we be considering 22 funds if they've already been paid?
We did pay for 21 when this started. We did pay theirs, and then I assume they must have thought that we were just going to continue doing that, and it was just a one-year deal or whatever. And basically, it's not only electricity. We're using county hospital space too for this, so to me, it seems like a reasonable amount.
And it should probably be put into a different budget moving forward.
Yeah, it should.
whether it be human services or maybe a more appropriate budget line item. So we don't have to continue to do this year in, year out.
And that's kind
My-
of what this resolution does.
My other question is, do you receive any funding from Western Dairyland Economic Opportunities?
They oversee, they take care of the physical equipment provision. They won't help with electricity for us, nor food. Donations only.
Is the electricity separately metered, so you pay what a meter reads, or is this somebody's calculation?
It's their calculation of what we are consuming.
I would like to see a different calculation, because based on information. Now, if you're asking for 600 for electricity and other things, okay, that's a different conversation. But this is, I've just reread it again, I don't see anything else other than electricity. I did a little research with another food pantry that runs 13 freezers in their pantry, and their electric bill runs about $200 a month, just a little over. 600 seems like a lot of money for electricity if that's, and if it's not metered in such a way. I'd like to see the calculation before we agree to the number.
They are also providing heat and air conditioning, and the structure itself, as you mentioned. So I would encourage rewriting the description of.
Okay, yeah.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, go ahead.
You want to come up to a mic?
Yeah.
Or go up front, whichever.
So this was first discussed at the county board level in 2020.
I have a
And-
copy of that resolution here, yes.
Okay. And then, as was suggested, we thought at that time, we weren't aware that we had to, that it was on a yearly basis. And so at the end of '22, I reached out to Paul and inquired about the payment of that, based off of that resolution. It was determined at that time it was not a rolling resolution, but a yearly one. So back in 2020 is when this conversation first started. I do have Nathan Olson, our Director of Maintenance, with me today. He was not the director at the time that this number was established. We did, the meter that does service the food pantry area services more than just that area. And so what we did at that time is we took a look at the amp usage of the existing freezers that were there. There was discussion at that time that they were going to receive a large walk-in freezer. That was also taken into consideration. Plus, there's an air conditioning unit in that area as well. There's heat that runs there. It is in an area that is in our old building. It's on the ground floor. It's where our dietary area used to be. And it has a loading dock, which I understand from Mr. McCray has been so useful for them to be able, it's a huge, big semi that comes with the food and such. And so moving that food from that truck into the areas and the freezers where they need it, using that loading dock is just
Critical.
critical, yes. So that's part of, all of that together. This $600 per month is just the electricity cost. We're not including a lot of other different areas towards that cost. We are paying that bill. This is a reimbursement towards that expense for us.
Anybody else with anything? Personally,
I don't
I
have
need,
any more
oh, go ahead,
I'll
Paul.
just say one thing. The way this resolution is written, I mean, you'll have to decide if you want to go backwards and do the 22, but it's that it's written just as it would be if it was the Trempealeau County Fair, it would be considered a donation.
Yep.
So one thing to consider as the, economy and needs of the public expand, right? Other facilities in the county, if we start paying for this, are going to be wanting us to pay for theirs as well. So it would be my suggestion that this wouldn't be an ongoing thing if we decide to pass this, but it should be annualized, and we should be requesting all private entities to be getting as much donations and funds to support themselves, and then the county can look to do its own share of that with that being said, so.
One thing hasn't been brought, what do you do in regard to fundraising?
We accept donations from the county, private and institutions. We don't campaign other than that, if you will, formally. Unless the donation specifies for other uses, the donations are only used for money, for food. So we're limited for the expanse of the usage of that donation.
And that is just what you have agreed to, or that's part of your, what's the word I'm looking for, contract charter, whatever, that says any donation must be used for food only?
Unless otherwise specified.
How does the general world decide? It takes money to operate too, where, other than asking us with public money to support, how did they anticipate you would get these bills paid? Was there ever any plan?
No, being a 501c3 organization, there is expected or for lack of better words, there is expected donation from the host or the community taking care of the pantry.
Okay.
The host in this case is the American Legion.
Okay.
And they provide some funding.
Have you ever tried any other organizations, Lions Clubs, Knights of Columbus, to ask for donations for this type of thing? That would be in line with their charters, I would think. I'm just trying to find other ways.
Right. We do get money from some Lions Clubs.
Okay.
Local, throughout the county.
Okay.
Community chest, financial institutions, be it banks or whatever, have donated.
Okay.
Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the resolution.
To amend it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, the second last paragraph, to be resolved, Trempealeau County Board of Supervisors hereby appropriates the $7,200 from the general fund to cover expenses, electricity expenses for the pantry for the calendar year of 2023 only. And then the last paragraph, resolve that the Trempealeau County Board of Supervisors hereby appropriates, just scratch that, just scratch the whole paragraph. So in other words, we can look to cover 2023, but then we would expect the organization to do some more fundraising and try to get the funds built up for 2024. And of course, it could be revisited at that point.
You're not gonna cover their last year's expenses?
It's already paid.
Well, they paid them though.
Right, great, thank you. That's what I'm suggesting.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak?
Seek.
for 22 and years forward, Jerry and I, this is a service. They're not even getting enough food to meet the needs that they're projected to need to serve in 2023. If this entity is not going to help fund, we'll figure it out on our end at the Trempealeau County Healthcare Center to be able to keep that service going. I have driven by there. There are cars all over the place there to receive these services. This is not a service that we can't have here, and we need to do our best to try to continue to service it and increase that service, not decrease it. So if that's the case, we will figure things out on our end to be able to keep this service going.
Well, that statement is appreciated, I understand where you're coming from, but it comes down to, we have a responsibility to all the taxpayers. And there again, this is my opinion. Where does county government come into this? If and when is it our responsibility to do something with this? Or is it our responsibility to encourage the general public to become more involved with donations of time, money, products? That's why I'm looking at questioning this. It's the taxpayer dollar I'm concerned about.
So my motion is to cover this 2023's expenses at $600 a month and leave it at that, and it could be revisited. So no one, in my motion, I'm not suggesting we don't help.
Right.
Yep. I'm just suggesting that we put some limits to it, and then we can keep, make sure we encourage all of our constituents to help support.
So, okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion? Any more discussion? Bridget?
I just want to state, I know that, I just want to make it known that I feel that, yes, it is taxpayers' dollars, but I also feel that the healthcare center is doing its part as, in the sense of it takes a village. So whether it's the Lions Club or the American Legion, we're not talking about funding their entire program. We're just talking about assisting where we can assist. And I don't feel that the number is that exorbitant. So it's just kudos to the healthcare center that's out there that's doing their part to help keep the food pantry moving along.
I agree with your statement. They're doing a good thing. There's no doubt about it. Any other discussion, questions? Okay, call for a vote to amend the resolution. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh.
Okay. 4-1. The amendment, the resolution is amended with those numbers. Now we have a resolution on the floor for approving the amended resolution, which is take out 22, so it'd just be for 7,200 for 23, and remove the paragraph.
Do we have the healthcare send us a monthly bill then that we pay, or what are we gonna do? How is that gonna work?
Who did we write the check to last year? Do you know?
It comes to the healthcare center because we paid the bill, and then we just apply those funds against the expense. However we did it last time, Paul, worked. We think that would work on our end.
You're gonna have to have something that tells
I'm
you.
gonna have to go back and find, I brought the original resolution.
I have a copy of that here too.
Is it gonna be an annual thing, or is it gonna be?
No, you changed it now. You just changed the one-shot deal.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So we don't have to pay this until next?
Well, we'll pay the 23.
Right.
Because it's not in the budget. And my understanding is now that they will come just like the healthcare center comes every year
Right.
at budget time
Yep.
Yes.
and ask for the money?
That would work. Apologize
Would they
for
come
that
in
last year.
conjunction, maybe
Sorry
with
about
you?
that.
With you?
Yeah, or we'll figure it out.
And this, of course, will go to full county board where it's subject to amendments at that time again, too. Okay, anything else on it? Call for a vote on the amended resolution. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
I didn't hear.
3-2, it's still,
Oh, you
I said
voted?
yes, yeah. I did quietly. Okay, it goes. Okay. Now I think we're ready to move to the closed session.
You got
Oh,
six.
wait a minute, ARPA funds yet. Wait, if I blew my arrow in the right place.
16 and 17 yet, and maybe even 18 before you close.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, we'll go to 17 then for the FEMA funds.
Or even the 16.
16.
Oh, yep, 16.
You
Yep.
should have a new updated sheet showing the requests, how much money you have allocated already, and how much is left to allocate. And it doesn't look really. The one thing is, if you decide in your borrowing, that item where it's registered deeds, media conversion and index servicing, that 233,000 would be taken away from ARPA and put into borrowing, but that's a decision you have to make. And, so that's where it sits. It's, we have that, the Osseo Stoddard Park rejuvenation, did I spell that right?
Yes.
Okay. I was, they were planning on coming this time, but John talked to the lady and said that they could come and present in March. Then, right after that, I got the one from the Blair Sportsman's Club on Lake Henry, and if you want them to come in March, they can do that also. The rest have all been, basically been presented to us.
Have you got a proposal of Lake Henry's in here already, too? Or is
It should be, it's on your sheet.
Okay, I see that, but I mean, they have a separate sheet.
Yeah, you
like-
should have, you should
Oh,
have
it
that
is.
in
I
your
see it.
packet.
Okay,
Yep,
I see
You
it.
should have
Yep.
that in your packet also.
Is the Stoddard Park in Osseo
Right.
County Park?
No, I
Well,
don't
it's
think
a
so.
City park.
City Park.
Municipal, yep.
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 Don't comment yet.
So that's all I got about the ARPA funds.
Okay,
If you want to go on to FEMA,
FEMA.
we got what we thought was the last payment. I haven't heard of anything else. The only other money that we should be getting back is the administration costs.
That's just basically all we got, everything we
Yeah,
got prior.
it's
Can we go back just a second, Chair?
To?
To the
ARPA?
ARPA here, yeah. So, I mean, the floor is still basically open in terms of people asking for money, right? Anybody can keep asking for money. I think we should make sure that people know how much money is there and how much money has already been asked for, just to let them know, by the way, we have 1.7585 million available, and to date, we've had over 12 million requested. If anybody's willing to look at other funds to fund their project, you might want to look at that, just FYI. How can we get that to them so they know?
Well, the last two projects that came in now in the last month and a half or so, they know, because I told them when they applied. I said, we only have 1.7 million. And
But they still
we
want
have
to come
12.
in front of us to.
And, well, at that point, I said we had $10 million in requests. And now with those two, that's $1,077,000 there, got added on. So those
Okay.
people did know.
Okay.
So
When are the people expecting a response back? I mean, we have
That's up
till
to you guys.
2024 to decide how to spend it, right?
Correct.
And then up to 2026 to actually spend it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can't we just tell these people from Osseo no right now? It's a city-funded project, it isn't Trumpealeau County.
It brings up another question. How do we decide, I mean, who gets priority? I mean, how do we make that decision? I don't
Well,
know.
it has to at least be part of what happens here,
I agree.
at least that for sure.
Yeah. Are these all legitimate requests, like the rules on ARPA spending can be spent on every one of these? They
You can
pass
use
the
it.
muster?
You
Yep.
can basically use it for anything.
Anything. That's where it's, because these monies are considered our lost revenues during COVID. And since you can claim lost revenues up to 10 million and we only got 5.7, the whole thing is lost revenues. So it's.
And the city of
open.
Osseo did receive funds, so that's where they should be going.
They got their own.
Right.
You probably will, one meeting, go through this list and knock out or whatever.
Right,
So this committee has to formally respond to each request?
You should, because you're the ones that allocate the money.
Yep, okay.
Yep. You could come out and say no to every single one there.
Well, as far as,
It's,
I'm looking at the Lake Henry one, and obviously we just got it, so I'm just browsing through it. And I'm not seeing here, Trempealeau has the same issue with their lakes area down there on the river. I'm not seeing anything in here unless they just didn't mention it, but there is state grant monies available, but I don't see anything that they actually applied for that grant. And they still can. So, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not sure, obviously, if, to your point, David, there's going to be a whole lot of organizations, Friends of the Lakes area down there, if they're all gonna want a piece of the pie per se, so I fully agree. Where do we draw the line? And I think that's an important conversation with the entire list of things.
back a few years ago, there was the CapEx, that's when the electrical poles
Yep.
Right.
went through and all that, everybody got money for that. The county share was quite a bit, and they went out and solicited what to use it on, and there were like, I wanna say 50 projects. And the committee designated a group to give point values, and the top 25 in the points got the money. So like, I know if, the Nature Center down at Trempealeau, that was totally funded with CapEx money. And there's a lot of other parks, and even the county park was in on it.
But that,
But that was CapEx money that we could spend
right, but
any
that
way we
was a
wanted.
whole different situation. This is to cover what cost us, where that was just a power line wanting to keep everybody happy, I guess. Is that a good way to put it?
And
That's
we
true,
should
that's true,
set
too.
some criteria, whether it's, how many, maybe it's the population that it impacts decides on how much money we spend on a project. Maybe some of those entities are unknown.
Something to
But
con-
yes, I think we should set up maybe 10 criteria, and anything that doesn't meet that criteria is,
something
or a
to-
point system.
Chair, just something to consider. We still have yet to receive the final, final contract bid on the remodel of this facility, right?
Right.
And we're estimating that's gonna be,
I don't know that I've heard a number, actually. Have I?
I think originally it was like
was
More
$3
than the
million.
funds.
3 million.
3 million originally.
so even if it's 2 million, this is 1.785. Every person in this county benefits when this facility is taken care of. So I just want to go on record saying that we have that obligation coming up, and this is a great way of helping us get that done.
For every
Not-
taxpayer benefits.
For the taxpayer benefit. So I'm not, what I'm saying is, I agree with you, but that would also be a taxpayer benefit. Some of these, in just looking at them, seem to be, boy, it'd be kind of fun to do, nice to do, but not have to do, like we have to do with this building. So we have time to decide, right? We got till December, right?
I don't know what, in 2024, I don't know what the date in '24.
At least another year.
Oh, yeah, more than a year.
So-
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it just, a lot can happen in that time, but I guess we have to keep allowing people to request the monies, but,
But allow them to, okay, but this community ones, I don't wanna spend their time or my time for them to come in here because it's issues here at the courthouse, not at
Exactly.
the park in Osceola.
yeah.
I think what you did allocate already back in July last year, that was to replenish the contingency and the furniture fixtures stuff on the project. That they're hoping that money will go towards the remodel, is
They're
my
hoping it's left.
understanding. That it'll still be there, so it'll be allocated to the remodel.
And municipalities also received ARPA funds.
Right, yeah.
So within their own community, they've decided how they want to spend it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
we're
mean,
good.
yes, it'd be great to fund them all. I mean, obviously, but
Well, no
the
kidding.
reality says we don't have enough money to do that.
Yeah, that's my opinion, that what's left of this money should sit in the account until we're sure the building is done. Or reasonably close to it if we're
Well-
approaching a deadline date.
You'd still have time because supposedly we're supposed to be done with the project in October this year.
Right.
So
Yep.
that's still in 2023, so you would
Well,
have time to.
Actually, I think we're done with the new building part, but not done with the remodel.
Right, yeah.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
So there'll be a tighter window to determine.
But I think that remodel was only supposed to be about a 6-month
Right,
project.
yeah.
So October still
So
would
we
be.
should have enough time to
mid-Oc-
decide, is there any money left over?
mid-2024. Yes, there you go.
Okay,
Well, if everything stays within budget,
right, exactly.
you know,
right.
so, but we're gonna be locked in on the timing of it for the decision by that, December,
Yeah,
so.
I agree. Okay.
Anything more on the funds? Okay,
FEMA fund.
do we want to set the time and date of the meeting before we go to closed session?
That'd be nice.
Sure.
Would be March 7? 6.
$8:30?
March 6th, okay. Then, we are ready for a motion to go to closed session. Does somebody have it in front of them to read?
I move we go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses G, to consult with legal counsel for legal advice on additional opioid settlement options.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Horst. Count, all in favor? Larson, yes?
Individuals, yeah.
Voice,
That's
what I
what he's
said.
doing,
I said I asked for in favor. Larson, yes?
yes.
yes.
Hassan?
Yes.
Yes.
Horst, yep.
Okay.
Okay.